Ideas, inspiration, innovation. This is The Game Changer. And now here's your host, Chicky Fitzgerald.
Good morning. This is Chicky Fitzgerald, and we have just an amazing group of guests this morning. And I will say, I think that this is the first time we've ever had more than two on my podcast. And I've been doing this for about 15 years. So that is really saying something. The book that we're going to be talking about is a book called LeadHERship Unveiled, Women Leading with Impact. And lest you think I mispronounced leadership, this is all about women and their role in leading. And the organization LeadHERship Global is Linda Fisk's organization. Many of you have met her before, and she's a dear friend. And I offered to introduce all of the authors from the book. And we are going to start this morning with Banya Barua. And Banya lives in Australia, but I think she's joining us from India today, which means it is not a good morning, but it's instead good evening to you.
That's so right. Absolutely correct. This is right now, the sun is setting and we are just about getting into night. That's where I am. But this is a holiday season for me. So I'm here for the holidays. I go back home sometime in a week's time or so.
And where in India are you?
I'm in Bangalore right now. Have you heard of Bangalore? It's the IT city.
Spent about $3 million on development in Bangalore back before it was fashionable. So yes, I have definitely heard of it. Well, terrific. And thank you for joining us this morning. And we're going to come back around and talk a little bit about your chapter in the book. But Banya, why don't you share with us just a little bit about your background? What's your day job? You can tell us a little bit about family. However, we can get a good picture of who you are.
Okay, so let me start with, I wear quite a few hats. So currently I teach, I'm an academic. I also do research, and both of them are with leadership. So I teach leadership, I teach on human resources, people, and also I do research on leadership development, which is the coaching that I do on the side. That is my side hustle. So I am a coach, I'm a leadership development coach, and I do leadership assessments. I also do leadership training. Mm-hmm. Currently, I am in a very exciting position in my life because there are two books that have been published. One is this, and the other one that got published is a book that is an academic book on workplace well-being, which is the other pet subject that I have other than leadership development. So that's the second thing that I'm doing. That's how I am.
Fabulous. And I know one of your colleagues here is also doing a lot of work in that area. So I'm going to jump to you next. Cecilia is actually a dear friend, probably from at least 20 years ago. I'm dating both of us. Cecilia, welcome. And you're joining us from the Boston area. So tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, thank you. So good to see you. I think it's been about 20 years that we've known each other. My name's Cecilia Dahl. I do live in New England. I live in Boothbay, Maine, currently. And as my day job, I have a company called Key 360 Advisors, and I'm the founder of the Remote Leadership Lab. In the Remote Leadership Lab, I work with companies who have remote teams to help their leadership develop the skills they need to be effective in remote workspaces. And I also have another business that I run under my Key 360 Advisors umbrella, which is called Travellytic. And that's a joint venture that I have with a team of data scientists. And I primarily work in the travel space because my background is in travel. That's how we know each other, Chicky. I've spent about, oh gosh, I hate to say it, maybe 35 years working with tour operators and in the travel space. So I know that industry very well, and that's where Travellytic comes into play.
Well, I love it. And you will notice a trend here. And I love to hear how people have a day job and then balance their passion projects. And Cecilia has way more than that. She's a musician. She and her husband run a kitchen that is shared by the community. So hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about some of those fun things. So let's jump to Susanne. And Susanne Ekstrom, I believe you are joining us from someplace across the pond as well.
Yes, I am. I'm joining from Sweden, Gothenburg, Sweden, on the west coast. Yeah, so for me, it's 2:00 in the afternoon.
Okay, well, tell us a little bit about your background and what is your day job?
Yeah, my day job is that I run my own company together with my team, and we are helping CEOs build winning companies where people love to work. So I'm a CEO coach, and I mainly focus on companies with around 50 to 200 employees, because I used to work as a management consultant for many, many years. And I realized that either as a founder or a CEO in a company of this size, you pretty much go through the same bottlenecks, problems, frustrations, ideas when you have to develop and empower both yourself and your people to the next level. And that is hard. And you have to start delegate and provide feedback in a way. And you also have employees on your team that just have the job as a job. They haven't been with you from the start, and they don't feel the same drive and energy for the company as you and your initial team, for example, do if you're the founder. So that's what I'm focusing on. And I am a single mom to 2 sons of 18 and 20. And one of my other passions is my youngest son. He has ADHD and autism. And I've been a single mom to him for since he was 11. And that has been a struggle for both him and me, because he was home for a lot of years, not participating in school or life. And the journey around now having him at a boarding school for kids with special needs, and seeing him thrive, and the journey from totally hopeless to getting back to a life worth living has been a really, in many ways, fantastic journey, but also, of course, really, really hard, devastating, and frustrating. So that is also one of my side. It's my side business, something that I really want to work on and develop later on too.
Well, I love hearing about that, Susanne. And, this kind of an interview, the thing that sets them apart is I've always believed that you have to share the full 360 of you. It can't just be, the high points and the business successes. Without the stories of the failures and the struggles, it just isn't as powerful. And there's a part of us always, that little voice on the shoulder that says, oh, don't tell about those things. But that's actually what makes us strong, is the willingness to open that. So we're going to hear a little bit more about that. Melanie, you're up.
Thank you so much for having us, Chicky. I'm excited to be here, excited to be part of this project. I am coming to you today from Billings, Montana. So I'm on the other end of the time zone than Bona. It's very early in the morning here, and we're having a lot of snow. So
yes, you mentioned that you had snowplows in the background.
So for everybody who thinks they want to move to Montana, take today into account. I am currently the CEO of a company that I started about 1.5 years ago called Upstream Strategy Partners. I left my corporate career after about 25 years because I really wanted to go and do some things that were really passionate for me. And for me, that was around leadership training, mental health in the workplace is a really big topic for me, and also substance use disorder in the family. So those are my 3 hot subjects. But right now, the work we're doing is we've created a company, or a sidebar company called Mind Wellness University, and we're piloting it in our community right now. where we go into workplaces and create a mental health advocate. So everybody should have a mental health advocate on their team. And so we're doing trainings and things of that nature to bring that mental health conversation to the workplace, which we are really excited about. The other thing that we do is youth prevention. We're having a lot of crime, and it seems to be happening from our youth, and so we're doing some prevention work around that as well. And again, I deliver all of my curriculums in the workplace, because I just am a really firm believer that that's where a lot of people are, and they have an opportunity to do more learning than just the work that they're doing in the workplace. They can also learn about their mental health. They can learn about community. They can learn about prevention. So that's where I'm headed. And then my side hustle is this. I have written another book called Life Jackets, and it's a story. It's my personal story about my journey through my daughter's addiction. And I just realized how many people in the world have someone in their family or someone that they deeply care about that has a substance use disorder. And it's really hard on the family, and it's especially hard on the mother for some reason. I know that probably makes sense if you're a mother. But just the book was really my story to share that this is happening to everybody in every walk of life. I had a super high level job, and I also had a super highly addicted child, and I was trying to manage both of those, and it was very challenging. And so I thought if I took to stay with our theme today, if I took the veil off of that, it would be maybe easier for other people to start talking about it and get the help that they need and find the resources.
Absolutely. And again, it is incredibly empowering, the level of transparency that you guys have shown, in the first 15 minutes of this interview. And the reason Cecilia and I know each other because we were both women leaders in the travel industry. But more importantly, I formed a group called the Executive Girlfriends Group. And we met every single Friday, for a couple of years. And the women would call in to a platform not unlike Zoom. But again, remember, this is like more than 15 years ago. And on that call, we had the freedom and the flexibility to share anything that was going on in our lives. So we got to know each other incredibly well. And it's really interesting. I've got connections as you each tell your story. I've got connections to each of you. I own a tech company, very much like some of the things that Cecilia is doing. And I've also been a strategic consultant. So I have been out in the field. This is my 13th startup. One of my stories actually began in Billings, Montana. So we'll talk about that one later, Melanie, because how many things is Billings central to. Mm-hmm. But I do want to jump into talking about the book. And I don't know if any of you, a couple of you have talked about other books that you've written. And one of my first book projects was a collaborative book like this. And again, it was, I don't know, maybe even 10 or 15 years ago. And it was called Bootstrap Business, which is kind of what I'm known for. And it was really, really an interesting experience, because not only do you get to share your wisdom, but you get to sit side by side by some other incredible women, again, 4 of whom are on the call today. So has anybody ever done a collaborative book project before? And tell me just a little bit about the experience, because I know a lot of women are being approached, even by LeadHERship Global, about other projects like this.
Yeah, do I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I have the book that I was talking about that has been published, I think, just a few weeks ago. And that is a collaborative one too, where I just played the role of the editor as well. So I was an author, but also an editor. But I also had many other, not only women, I think most of them were women. I had a majority of women authors, and they were from across the world. So I had from Turkey, Europe, Lisbon, then I had from USA, of course, Australia, of course, and a few from India. So altogether, I had around 11 countries participating in it, and all of them wrote about workplace well-being and how does it affect their thing. And there were a lot of case studies on it and challenges that they've faced. but that was more of an academic book. So it has got a lot of, it's like a typical academic book that it was, but it was a collaborative one, yes.
Well, the nice thing about those books is because it's not a single threaded story like a novel would be, you can have it sitting around and you can pick it up when you have time. And I find, at least for me, because I'm very faith driven, as you'll see by my wall behind me, I know God leads me exactly where I need to be on exactly the day. And in fact, in my own book, I had read it so many times during the editing process, and you guys know all about that. The interesting thing about these collaborative books is that there is a thread through all of them, not just because of the topic, but because there's a thread that ties all of you together. Anybody else want to speak up about the process of the collaborative book project?
Yeah, I will. This is my second collaborative book. My first one was for teenagers. It was your leadership advice for a teenager. And so I talked about empathy and leadership, and that was really, really fun. But the best part about that whole experience was when we went to the book signing, one of the chapters is written by a teenager, and he like stole the show. All the rest of us were just like, oh, we don't matter because he's going to be the leader of the world. So it was really fun to see somebody get some impact from the book, but also contribute.
Cool is that? Okay, anybody else before we jump into the contents of this book?
Sure, I'll chime in. I have a book. I have a book that I wrote with my business partner called "The Unlocking the Secrets of Remote Leadership," and I did that before the last collaborative project. So I did that one first, and it was, almost a 2-year-long project for us. And what I love about working on a collaborative book is there's an opportunity to get part of your story out there, surrounded by, and in this particular case with this book, some really incredible leaders and women whose stories are so powerful and impactful. And I just love it because the weight of that entire project isn't on your shoulders. And we've had this opportunity with this book in particular to share our chapters and give each other feedback. And I found that extremely inspiring. And I think I'm just so proud to be part of this project. And I love this because I don't have time to do another book on my own. And this is an opportunity to participate without having to carry that full burden.
I was hoping somebody would come up with that, because if anybody has written your own book, not only do you bear the weight of the editing and the writing, and of course the editors always help, but it always amazes me that you can still find a typo right after so many eyes and so many readings even of yourself. But what I started to say about my own book is I found I wrote it for me. And while I hoped that a lot of people would buy it, right, every time I go back and read it, I always have a pen in hand because there's always something that jumps out at me. And because you guys shared your chapters, I am quite certain that that happened. Anybody else want to say anything before we dive into the book?
I just want to say that this is my first go at it at all. So it has been really, really great way of starting and try it out in not so huge project, and also to do it together with other women. Yeah, it's a really, really great experience, and yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Right. Well, Susanne, I'm gonna actually start with you, because as you were telling your story, and actually a bit of your backstory about your son, my daughter is 26, lives in the UK, and she went to school for psychology and then ended up wanting to move to the UK because of a man. Love is always a backstory, right? But the interesting thing is she got her degree in education and now is working in a school for autistic and other challenges. And she is absolutely loving it. And she's right now, and I don't want to say just a teacher's assistant because it's beneath her education, but she is having an impact on the kind of kids that your son is, right? So it is such an encouragement to me that you share your story about his experience, right? So you know, when we think about telling our story and talking about the book, and you've got a very interesting topic. And again, you shared it a bit in your own backstory about the transition from being in a position of vulnerability to a position of power. And I know now that that comes a bit out of your backstory. So how did you choose that as your topic in a leadership book?
Yeah, my topic is from not good enough to be able to have the power to create. And I started out as playing a lot of basketball in high school, and I wanted to be the point guard, but my coach put me as a center because I was tall. And at 16, 17, I didn't have the communication skills and the courage to speak up for myself and say, hey, I want this, and have a conversation with someone around it. So instead, I became unmotivated. I've really loathed going to the training. And one day I just went from the training back home, and I never went back. And I haven't played basketball since. And that was when my I'm not good enough started. Then I was one of the main owners of a large Swedish.com in the beginning of the 2000s. And I was number 11, I think, when we started. I grew a branch from just me up to 110 people. And then I moved to the Netherlands to start up that office. And then suddenly I had to go home to Sweden and fire all my people I've hired. And then a couple of months later, we filed for bankruptcy. And yeah, so things added on to my not being good enough. And while I was doing a lot of great projects and had amazing clients, still there was something in the back of my head all the time that, hey, Susan, when are they going to find out that you are a total fake? Wow. Yeah, it was really something that followed me, what you said, Chicky, sitting on your shoulder there. Your best friend is telling you all the time that you're not good enough, and other people are much better. And from the start, I went into, for example, a leadership team, and one of them leadership team members. And then after a while, someone said something that I thought maybe was personal, and are they challenging me? And then I suddenly started to not finding myself, not feeling the confidence anymore, and slowly began to withdraw, become silent, and lose my self-confidence. And that has been my company throughout the life. And 1.5 years, I went to a personal training course, and that's one of the main results out of that was the journey I told briefly about with my son, but also that I saw that it's all in my head. I get to transform my thoughts and feelings and clear myself from that, and I can create whatever I want. Either I can create myself before I make a phone call that they are not going to answer, and if they do, they are so successful, and what can little I provide them. Or I can say, yeah, I'm a powerful CEO coach. Look at what this person has done, and he or she must be really, really great to work with, and what an amazing opportunity it is for us to together work on being even more successful.
Right.
So that is the transformation I had. And I also saw with my son during that weekend course that I wanted to fix him. he was at home 24/7, and I was talking. We have this great relationship, but I was talking to him as he will always say no when I ask him anything. And so I asked him things and he said no. And I had to bribe him to get him out of the house. And that was my life for 4 years, our life for 4 years. And he didn't even want to go down to the kitchen to have dinner. So we had to negotiate how much of the dinner he would eat at the kitchen table and how much he could eat up in his room.
Right.
And during this weekend, I realized that I both spoke and listened to him in a way that wasn't beneficial, and that I wanted to fix him, because this isn't the life that I wanted to have. And I was trying to get him to fit into my world instead of seeing and be interested in his world. So, and when I started to do that, we changed it. And I think it was 4 months after I did the course, he started a specialized boarding school that is 2 hours away from where we live. And that was 1.5 years ago now. And instead of being 4 years behind that he was when he started, he's now only 1 year behind. And at the moment, he reads all the subjects plus 4 extra subjects because he wants to catch up.
Right.
So,
that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. And it sounds like it also created a freedom for you that spilled over onto the business side, as is, very common. What I want to bring out and would love for someone else to talk a little bit about their imposter syndrome, because guess what? We all have been there, and it looks different for each of us. And when I experienced it, every time I was going to any meeting where there were going to be a bunch of people there, usually that I didn't know, I would have a dream the night before of being on a ski lift. And I hate the snow, I hate the cold, and I'm not a good skier, and I hurt myself the first time I went. But on that ski lift, I'm looking down, and there are men in suits skiing on moguls, which is, of course, one of the hardest ways to ski. But it was just a picture of my own insecurity. Cecilia, you look like you've got something on the tip of your tongue that you'd like to talk about.
Well, I mean, I'm nodding my head because, of course, we all have imposter syndrome. And I think for me, what's really interesting is that I had a transition. So I have always worked in the travel space. As you know, Chicky, I founded a company back in 2000, which was a successful in the attraction ticketing space. And we had, 3 rounds of venture capital, and I kind of charged through that like a bull, and we got through it and we had our exit. And then I started Travalytic, and that was going great. And then COVID shut everything down. And that's when I pivoted and decided, because I had built smart destinations with remote teams, to work on supporting these teams that are now remote and the leaders that now have to learn to lead them. Because I learned by a million cuts how to make those pivots. I lived that nightmare in my own time and made it into something that really worked for me. But what I really found was, I'm going to just echo what Susanne said. I felt like a fake. For, and people would say, no, you really know what you're talking about. I couldn't convince myself until I started the program, until I got some people through the cohort. And then I heard from them what a difference and what a transformation I was making. But I really wasn't able to get myself there on my own until I got through the program with several cohorts. And it was the most interesting thing, because I've always been very bold and I've always been very confident. And all of a sudden, I found myself not selling a product like I always have, but I was selling myself. And I was gutted by it. Like I was having a hard time getting there. And when you say that word imposter syndrome, it just resonates with me, because I get it. It's I can't explain it. It's just there, and we all have to battle it. So.
Right. But I will tell you, because years ago, and I don't even remember what year, I was still a consultant. This was before I chose to become a tech CEO. And I had a client that had a need for leadership training. And that wasn't my expertise. I'm a strategist. And so I hired Cecilia to come in and work with me. It was at Club Med, of all wonderful places. We did an offsite at one of their facilities, and she stole the show. And a part of me was that imposter syndrome of, well, why couldn't you do this? She was born to do this, right? And so you weren't selling yourself, you were selling them on what they could become, right? And so, you know, I had the pleasure of watching you step into that long before you started that training program. But those were the seeds of you seeing the success, because for the follow-up, they called you, they didn't call me. And that was actually totally okay, because I needed to be where I was supposed to be. Cecilia, since we've got you on the hot seat right now, why don't we talk a little bit? And you've already alluded to this whole thing about how important resilience is. And you've got a very unique story. And, you know, it has to do with the fact that your parents were immigrants. And when we think about immigrants, you know, these days, because of the political climate, we're thinking about people coming across our southern border. And those aren't the only kind of immigrants that we have here. So tell us the story of your family and how all of that played into making you the resilient woman that you are today.
Sure. First of all, I apologize. You just made me very emotional. So thank you. That was very kind words from you. You're someone I admire, and I appreciate that so much for the part that you've played in my story. And yeah, my parents immigrated to the US about 50 years ago. My parents are from Norway, both of them. And they had both grown up under the occupation in the early days when the Nazis were occupying Norway. And my dad at age 25 had decided he was going to move to Australia, and then he decided he was going to move to the US. And by happenstance, he met my mom at a Christmas party. He was living in Bergen, Norway, and she was living in Oslo. And they met and some sparks flew. They met one more time. And then on the third time, he proposed and said, "Come to America." So this is them. And they're still, look at me, I'm emotional. And this is how I got when I was talking to Kathy Dirksen, who put this all together. She said, "Well, what made you who you are?" And I was like, geez, I don't really know. Like, my parents have never been leaders or managers, and they've never really done business. My mom was a librarian. My dad was an electrical engineer. And then I started to think about their story. And it wasn't like I walked around my whole life saying my immigrant parents have taught me these leadership stories. I just started to reflect on it because of this chapter. And I thought, well, holy cow, how brave and bold were they to make that leap, to go where they didn't have a support system, to forge something new from nothing. Back then, they had to get married because you weren't allowed to live together if you weren't married in the US in that time. So they were forced into this marriage. Not that they were forced, they chose, but they had to actually make it official. And it was a tough road. It was a tough road, lots of up and downs. They didn't have much money. One year they couldn't even buy a Christmas tree. They had to get this little twig. And, you know, I mean, they just struggled, but they were very resilient. They learned a lot of lessons, and it was difficult growing up in that environment because they did get married without knowing each other. So there was a lot of friction, there was a lot of fighting, and they somehow found a way, probably by the time I was 10 or 11, to figure it out and make it work. And suddenly peace kind of came onto our house. So, you know, it's really interesting because just what reflecting on this taught me is that leadership is all around us. And while I do encourage official leadership training for people who are coming up, I also encourage people to look at the people who influence their everyday life. And even if they're not a boss or a manager, find the leadership that they're bringing to the world, because we can all show up as leaders in different ways. And as I went back and looked through their story, I kind of was like, wow, that's an incredible leadership lesson. And this is an incredible leadership lesson. And as I was writing the chapter, I visit my parents every other week now, and I was interviewing them, trying to get more out of it. And they were very reluctant at first. My father said, I'm not a leader. You can't have me. I'm not a leader. And I kept giving my perspective, and it took a while to even get them to realize that their resilience, their drive, their boldness, their courage, the way that they had empathy towards others who they didn't necessarily agree with, but learned to live with and collaborate with, was all one big giant leadership lesson for me throughout my life. And I did learn a lot of resilience from their challenges, I'm sure, because it was it's something else. I realized I don't know if I could move to a foreign land with nothing and build a life for 50 plus years. It's
Wow.
it was inspiring.
Well, Cecilia's chapter is called Roots of Resilience. And, speaking of emigrating, I know, Bona, you must have a story about this, and perhaps you didn't move with nothing, but you left the place of your birth in India. And it sounds like you left a lot of friends and family behind, and you now live in Australia. So why don't you pop in and tell us a little bit about your story? And I love the fact that you use the chrysalis and the butterfly. So why don't you step onto the stage and we will talk about your book.
All right. So this chapter was actually from the heart. I had never written a non-academic write-up before. This is the first time I've ever written a non-academic write-up. So for me, this writing was more of putting through my thoughts. That's what I actually did right in the beginning. The first draft was all about that. So, when you speak about immigration, Cecilia, uh, ours was not even an immigration. It was not even planned. It just happened. And we just went through with it. And it was like, okay, the next career move seems to be good if you go to Sydney. So why don't you go ahead? So that's how it was. But once you reach there, that's when, and I hadn't even reached. It was my husband who had received a transfer. So he was moving from his company in India, Bangalore, to the same company in Sydney. That's it. So it was like, okay, that's fine. It doesn't sound so unsettling when you just say it this way, but in real life, it's quite unsettling because I said, no, I would go with my work. So let me just stay back. And, when I get the transfer, because my company was a global company too, and I could have taken a transfer. So, and my company said, you know what, we will need somebody there in your position. So just give us this 18 months, no, 24 months. And then, we can transfer you there too. So everything seems so, wrapping up quite well. But then when you have a little child and the child starts feeling that the father's not there, that is when the reality seeps in. And that's when, you start feeling, uh-oh, it's not really working out the way it should do. Because my child started looking at me like I'm the villain. I'm the one who is not letting him be with his father. So that's when I had to take the decision that no, I have to resign. I can't wait for the transfer. And then I went off to Sydney without a job. So this chapter actually talks about how the search for a new job and what really happened when I was searching for a new job and what I had to go through and how you're talking about imposter syndrome before this, and you won't believe it how many times I was made to feel I am an imposter. Sometimes I was even made to feel that my resume was made up and it wasn't really my experience. And it's so amazing that when people tell you that with so much confidence, you sometimes believe it. Oh, really? Oh, I really didn't do much. That work wasn't really much. And when you are working, when you're working, say, like I was in a management role in a middle management, but a role just below the general manager. So I was working almost 12 hours, 14 hours a day because I worked with US, I worked with UK, and I worked with India. So the time zones made it difficult to work in one stretch. And at that time, it didn't seem much that whatever I had done. But then later on, as I went through interview after interview after interview, and I got rejected and rejected for things I don't really know why. And the reasons that were given were not really what it was. And that's when, realization strikes you that this is maybe not the pathway. There must be some other thing for me to do. And that's where my company started. I started my company after that, and then I grew it slowly. And my company is still my side hustle, by the way, because I'm still an academic. I'm still attached to a uni, but I have a side hustle, which I really want to make my own. make that my main concentrated, business to work with. So that's how the whole thing started. And you would work on it in a way that you really, you face so many things, so small, little things. It's not that you face a lot of things at once. It's not a big bang or a big blow that you get. It's small, little things that keep incrementally telling you that no, you're not what this is. This is not who you are. And then you have to reestablish yourself. And then you have to say that, no, this is who I am. And this is what the whole thing is. And then find it within you to have the courage, the resilience, as Cecilia is saying, the resilience to really stand up and say, no, but this is where I stand and this is where I will be. It started with my accent, it started with my complexion, everything. And to take a stand on it and say that, no, I'm not going to change anything if it is going to make me become an imposter, if it is going to make me change into something that is not who I am.
Right, right. Well, I want to interject here because, again, the picture of the chrysalis, and I think most of you know this, but if you took a chrysalis, which is the container that is around the butterfly before it breaks out, if you actually cut it open, the butterfly will not survive, because part of what makes it so strong is the pushing against that to get out. And when someone tries to make it easier for you, and I'm sure there were people who were helping you along your journey, but it was that push that allowed you to just spread your wings. And the interesting thing, we've been talking about the little man who sits on one shoulder. Well, guess what? There's one on the other shoulder too, and that's the one who tells you who you were meant to be. And we have to really tune our ear, because that voice is quiet, it's gentle. And any of you who are parents know that if you yell at your kids, they block you out. If you whisper to them when they're in trouble, they come closer, right? And I think that this is really the most incredible picture about the chrysalis. And again, your chapter is called Mirroring Reflections, the chrysalis. So just in closing on your story, because we still need to hear from Melanie. So what was the bottom line of your contribution to the book? What message were you trying to get across?
Okay, so this is related. So while I was writing this one, I was actually also working on a project which was on women social entrepreneurs, and I'm still working on that. So from that project, I came to learn that women find it very difficult to be authentic leaders. It has been scientifically, empirically studied that it is very difficult for a woman to be totally authentic, to be able to be transparent and vulnerable and present oneself that way as a leader. So that's where I thought of that. Here is something that I can put together. And I looked into myself, because there are things which I find that, okay, this ticks the authenticity box if in myself. That's a self-assessment. So I did that, and that's where I brought it together. And I said, no, these are the parts that I can bring together and talk about how one person can want to become an authentic leader, and you can transform yourself to be an authentic leader. It is possible to be one. So that's the little contribution that I wanted to give, so that, anyone who reads feels that if I want to be an authentic leader, here is a pathway that I can follow.
All right, wonderful. Well, Melanie, I gave you a little teaser about your city, and my story as the leader of my current company came out of I had a niece, well, still have a niece. Was 15 at the time, and she had a horrible accident in Wyoming. She was airlifted to Billings, Montana, and none of us lived there. I got the call as the youngest sister and the one in the travel industry. You need to find us a hotel. And fast forward through the story, they were able to reattach her arm. She's living a wonderful life now. But I came home from that trip saying, I've got to fix this. This happens every day. And it was just about the difficulty when you're under stress of finding a hotel. And I wrote an application called the Hotels Nearby Hospitals, which is now Traveling to Give. And so your town was a part of that story and that inspiration. And I had never been there before and haven't been back since. But tell us a little bit about your backstory, Melanie.
Yeah, so it's fascinating to listen to other people's stories because everybody has a little piece of the same story. And a lot of it came from one of the things I've learned in my leadership journey is adversity has formed a lot of the reasons that you're living the way you're living now or the way that you lead now. And so I've had my share of that. And at the time that adversity is happening, you're usually just so taken by it. It's just all consuming that you don't realize all the lessons that it's teaching you. And I as I look back, I had this one really kind of tragic year, and it was my first company filed for bankruptcy. My husband was diagnosed with MS, and I realized my daughter was an alcoholic, all within a 6-month period of time. And so as you're just absorbing one thing coming at you after another, trying to survive that. But now I'm on the other side of that, and you get to see it, and you get to see all of the wonderful lessons that you learned in that adversity. And so I started to think a lot about that. And I was having a fantastic career. I was clipping along, and I was working in economic development, and COVID came. And COVID really rocked our world because you don't think about economic development and COVID really in the same breath at first, because it's a disease and it's a health problem and all of those things. But the truth of it was also affecting our economy. All of our small businesses were affected and all of that. And we really had to define a new role in a tragedy. And my job had always been in public relations, communications, marketing, all of those things. And for the first time, I was just faced with this. I really have no idea how to do this. And quite honestly, our community didn't know how to do it. And I was like, gosh, if we had to have known that a pandemic was a possibility, right? Like, and why didn't anybody plan for this? Why do we not have anything in place? Why are we fighting internally about this? And so this is where this concept of upstream came from. That's why I named my company that. That's why I've built all of my most recent leadership philosophies around the metaphor of a river, because the truth of it is, if you're seeing something coming on the horizon that is going to be a challenge. And I think the world we're living in right now, you can see that we are about to hit some challenges here. I just had a big project lose some federal funding. So, that's a new problem that we have never challenged ourselves with before. But now it's like, okay, I'm going to go upstream and figure out what is the solution to that from a higher level. If you get yourself out of the ground level muck of a problem, and you go and look at it from this really higher perspective and look down on it, you can start to see all of the possibilities. You can see where it's possibly going. You can see what brought you there. You just get a different perspective. And I'm just a firm believer in this. I'm a firm believer that if we start to look at our challenges sooner and differently, we will be able to solve them together. And so I'm really working on that with my team. I'm just in the process of forming a new team, which has been so amazing when you get to form a new team based off of a philosophy that has taken you 20 to 30 years to get to. And a lot of younger professionals are on my team. And so it's just been really fun to do. But the one story that I tell about this is we had an oil spill in our local river. This is sort of how this upstream concept all came to be. And when it happened with a big oil company, Philip, I better not say the company. Anyway, a big company. And they brought in so many resources. Like in 2 days, we had every possible resource to clean up that river. Millions and millions of dollars, people, resources, trucks, everything. And I thought, if we would spend this much time on fixing some of the social ills that our community is facing, and at the time for me, substance use was a big one, mental health, those sorts of things. If all of a sudden I said, oh my gosh, 10 people just fell in the river because they committed suicide, and we had trucks and people and money and all of the things, I'll bet you we wouldn't have that problem. And so that's been sort of my life goal now. And that's why my chapter, which is called Seek to Understand, is really about, we have to understand sooner why these problems happen. And we have the power, the resources, the money, the everything to really address them if we have the will to do it. And so how do I move people to get that to that place and start to solve problems before they're catastrophes.
Well, I so love that. And especially the juxtaposition of being able to look back and being on the other side, right?
Yes.
Being on the other side of that river. And while it may seem like tragedy, any one of these things that the four of you have shared. I mean, I think about my own life and my bankruptcy that I had to go through when my leadership team betrayed me. I was on a cruise for my 50th birthday, and I came home and they had convinced my investor to shut my tech company down. And as I look back, what I have learned and what I think you all have talked about is the role of adversity and failure, and it becoming not only teacher, but friend, right? And there's something that happens when you learn to tell your story without the bitterness of the pain and the struggle, but to share the triumph. And out from all four of you, I have heard that thread, and that's what ties you together in this amazing book that you are all a part of. And again, we have been talking to Cecilia Dahl, Banya Barua, I'm sorry, and Susanne Ekstrom and Melanie Schwarz, and they are all collaborative authors on a book called LeadHERship Unveiled: Women Leading with Impact. And we are going to provide in the posting of this interview the way to contact each one of them, so they will have that ability to reach out and share their story personally with you. Because again, I highly encourage everyone. I've just gone through going through my entire LinkedIn network and seeing who are really the people who want to support me, who want to be supported by me, who want to be friends. And we all need to get closer together, because I think what we've learned today from the four of you is you all have the ability to come together and be stronger together. And in sharing your story, and especially in sharing the weaknesses and the things that have been your challenges, that's where we really, really get strong. So thank you guys all so much. We have just a minute left for you all just to share one last nugget. Just if you can just keep it short, we'll go around the table. Cecilia, why don't you start with what you want to leave from this book?
I want to leave everybody with the understanding that leadership is all around us. Look for it and live it. Live your leadership. Bring it forward every day.
Fabulous. Bona?
Well, for me, I think it would be that for everyone, it is possible to be authentic, irrespective of whether you're a man or a woman, it doesn't really matter. So you just need to develop that mindset to want to be authentic. That is one thing that I would really like to share. And thank you very much for having me here.
Oh, you're welcome. Susanne?
Yeah, for me, it's really important to everywhere in life to wear my large ears. And I tell my clients that as well. You have 2 ears for a reason and 1 mouth. And the more you listen, and the better you will be at listening and recreating the person in front of you, the better communication, the better conversations you will have, and the more profound relationships you will have, both with your employees, your family and friends, and new opportunities.
I love it. Melanie, bring us home.
Yes. So mine is just to mentor someone else. I mean, at this point in your career, you've learned so much, you've got so much knowledge. Please go out and mentor a young person that's also wanting to grow their career, grow their profession. Maybe they have a dream. Go help them.
I love it. Well, this has been just an amazing discussion. We could do this all day long. You have been listening to The Game Changer, and we have got 4 game changers here. Again, the book is available on Kindle right now. LeadHERship Unveiled is the name. And so you can go on Amazon. And again, we will put in the comments on the post on our website, which is thegamechanger.network. And these have been Women Leading with Impact: Cecilia Dahl, Banya Barua, and am I pronouncing it right, Susanne? Is it Suzanne or Susan?
Susanne.
Suzanne, I'm sorry. Susanne Ekstrom and Melanie Schwarz. Thank you guys so much for joining me today.
You've been listening to The Game Changer. Ideas, inspiration, innovation with Chickie Fitzgerald.